F-18 fighter jet taking off from the deck of USS Gerald R fort. It is the largest aircraft carrier strike group in the world, the largest warship ever built by the United States and US Navy's most advanced nuclear-powered aircraft carrier with roughly 10,000 troops and dozens of aircraft and weapon systems. The US Navy has now moved it to the Latin American and Caribbean region. This US aircraft carrier joins other warships, a nuclear-powered submarine, and aircraft based in Puerto Rico, located in the northeastern Caribbean Sea. This is said to be the largest US military presence in the region since the US invasion of Panama in 1989 and its Operation Uphold Democracy in 1994, when it sent 2 aircraft carriers and more than 20,000 troops to Haiti. A military buildup is escalating. On one side is the US, on the other is Venezuela. Hello and welcome to Connecting the Dots. I'm Manman Bhattacharya. Let's connect the dots of the US-Venezuela military showdown in Latin America. The aircraft carrier joins US operations against drug trafficking from Latin America. Since September, the United States has deployed warships, fighter jets, and thousands of troops for anti-narcotics operations here, allegedly targeting drug trafficking from Venezuela and Colombia.
Well, the United States is involved in a very large military buildup in the Southern Caribbean. Something like 10% of the U.S. Navy's deployed assets are currently in the SOUTHCOM area of responsibility. This is not something that the region is accustomed to seeing. Normally, the United States has a much lighter military footprint in this region.
The U.S. has been bombing boats, allegedly carrying drugs. The latest attack occurred on Sunday in the Eastern Pacific Ocean. U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth reported 6 deaths aboard 2 vessels. So far, 20 boats have been bombed, leaving at least 76 dead. The U.S. alleges, without presenting evidence, that the boats it bombed were transporting drugs. But foreign leaders, some members of the U.S. Congress, legal experts, and family members of those killed have called for proof. A Reuters investigation reveals that the U.S. military is upgrading a long-abandoned former Cold War naval base in the Caribbean. This suggests preparations for sustained operations that could help support possible actions inside Venezuela. The U.S. is also building out facilities at civilian airports in Puerto Rico and St. Croix in the U.S. Virgin Islands. These 2 U.S. territories sit roughly 500 miles from Venezuela. And that's not all. The Trump administration has also reportedly authorized the CIA to conduct covert operations against Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro's regime aimed at combating drug trafficking. The CIA operations reportedly include collaboration with regional governments and intelligence agencies, use of drone strikes, cyber attacks targeting Maduro's administration, and potential plans for more direct actions, such as capturing key drug trafficking suspects within Venezuela. The U.S. administration and intelligence agencies accuse Venezuela of being a major hub for drug trafficking due to corruption, weak governance, and the presence of powerful drug gangs and militias, some allegedly linked to high-ranking officials in Maduro's regime. U.S. accuses Maduro personally of leading the Cartel of the Suns. It's a Venezuelan drug trafficking organization comprising high-ranking Venezuelan military and political officials.
He is one of the largest narco traffickers in the world and a threat to our national security. Therefore, we've doubled his reward to $50 million. Under President Trump's leadership, Maduro will not escape justice and he will be held accountable for his despicable crimes.
U.S. has even designated some Venezuelan criminal groups as foreign terrorist organizations, but Maduro denies these claims. He sees U.S. actions as a direct military threat, a bid to topple his government, and an escalation of U.S. interventionist policies in the region. The deployment of the USS Gerald R fort to Latin American waters has significantly heightened tensions between the United States and Venezuela.
I think this is happening now for a number of reasons. First, the Trump administration is very keen to demonstrate that they are implementing a new paradigm when it comes to dealing with counter narcotics. No longer is the US Coast Guard the lead operator in these missions, but the US Navy and the US Air Force have been brought in to support and in many ways take over these missions. And I think that that new paradigm is there because the administration is keen to show that foreign terrorist organization designations for cartels in Latin America have consequences, in this case, lethal consequences. This is not just rhetoric, but it is indicative of a new operating model which sees the US Navy and the US Air Force in the lead and the US Coast Guard no longer. Second, I think the administration understands that Maduro himself and his regime is implicated in these kinds of activities.
With the world's largest warship deployed close by, Maduro declared Venezuela is ready to win. A massive military mobilization was launched involving the Army, Air Force, Navy missile units and the Bolivarian militia, along with civilian training for possible guerrilla warfare. The country is in a high state of military alert. Maduro has signed a new law to defend the nation. The law establishes the creation of integral defense commands.
As of this moment, by signing this law, all integral defense commands that bring together all public institutions of the Venezuelan state, the military institution, and all popular power must be activated at dawn today. So, by signing, the order must be activated for the integral defense commands to be established, structured, and put to work to be prepared. If we as a republic, as a people, must go to armed struggle to defend this sacred heritage of the liberators, we must be ready to win, to triumph through the path of patriotism and courage. So I proceed to sign and execute the law for the creation of National Integral Defense Commands, signed, approved, and ratified today, Tuesday, November 11, 2025. And I say, with the whole country, peace, 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 we want peace. We will have it. Facing maximum pressure, maximum preparation, execute this law immediately.
Like we told you before, Venezuela's preparations include asymmetric warfare tactics such as guerrilla resistance. Now, these are irregular defense methods in the face of conventional military inferiority vis-a-vis US military power. The stakes are high, as military posturing could easily lead to miscalculations.
We are lovers of peace. We deeply love peace. We do not want war either here or anywhere in the world. But if they come to touch Venezuela, well, they will find us here. Walk through the streets, walk through the barracks, walk through the communes, walk through the communal militia units, and there you will see a people determined to defend this homeland to the death.
What's more, Russia's vocal support for Venezuela and condemnation of US actions adds an international dimension that compounds the regional security dilemma. Regional neighbors like Colombia have also reacted sharply. Colombia has halted intelligence cooperation with the US over ongoing actions against suspected drug traffickers. Here's what could happen next. There could be prolonged military mobilization and asymmetric defense by Venezuela. The military mobilization may strengthen nationalist sentiment and solidarity under Maduro, but it can also deepen internal divisions if prolonged tension worsens economic conditions and leads to social unrest.
If the US does start hitting land-based targets in Venezuela, you could have the Venezuelan armed forces decide that they will act in the interest of self-preservation and that their future is not with Maduro, that their future is actually with the democratic transition, that they've never been. The Venezuelan armed forces, it should be noted, the modern Venezuelan armed forces have never been in conflict before. So the context changes dramatically if the US begins to hit land-based targets in Venezuela. They've never experienced anything like that before, and they may well decide that their interests, their future, lies with someone other than Nicolás Maduro. And in that scenario, they could deliver Maduro to justice, they could kill or capture him, They could try to seize power themselves. They could stand on the side of a democratic transition. That could play out in a number of ways.
There is also a risk of localized clashes or incidents. The presence of multiple US naval ships, including stealth aircraft like F-35s and Venezuelan forces, increases the chance of accidental or intentional military engagements that could escalate tensions. There is a risk of the conflict widening too, with Venezuela seeking military support from Russia, China, and Iran. While the potential for diplomatic de-escalation exists, it is overshadowed by ongoing military posturing, regional apprehensions, and unresolved political conflict. Given the risk of escalation, what's urgently needed is diplomatic engagement to prevent a major conflict. On November 9, a riot broke out inside a prison in Ecuador. It was early in the morning. Gunfire and explosions echoed through the air. When security forces finally regained control, they discovered a horrifying sight. At least 31 inmates were dead. According to Ecuador's prison authority, 27 of them died from asphyxiation by suspension. In other words, they had been hanged. 4 others died earlier in the morning during the riot.
How are their weapons inside? When you bring in objects, they check everything, even a water container. So everyone is asking how there are weapons, how they kill each other inside.
But why did the riot begin? It started when rival gang groups inside the prison clashed. Ecuador's prison agency, known by its initials SNAI, says the violence was triggered by a planned transfer of certain inmates to a newly built maximum security prison. First, a violent outbreak left dozens injured and 4 people dead. Hours later, guards discovered 27 inmates hanged on the 3rd floor of the building, likely reprisals carried out inside the facility. This is not an isolated incident. The same prison, located in the city of Machala, saw another deadly episode just recently.
Deme otro cartucho. Ahí. Ya estaban disparando, ya. Bien, den seguridad al frente. Ey. Dele, yo. Ya está limpio, vamos. Que siga avanzando.
In September, a riot there left 14 people dead and 14 wounded.
El que está ahí.
And only days later, a prison in the northern city of Esmeraldas reported 17 more deaths. The fact that inmates could hang one another, and that too in large numbers, shows how much power they hold inside the system. And that power comes from one thing: the role of gangs. In Ecuador, prisons have become hubs of gang control. These gangs don't just fight each other inside. They are sophisticated criminal organizations with international links. Two of Ecuador's most notorious groups, Los Generos and Los Lobos, have even been designated foreign terrorist organizations by the US Department of State.
We gave a severe blow to the Lobo structure when we seized their assets and companies. We did the same thing with the Conaros. We attacked them and caused them damage of more than 20 or 30 million dollars.
These are not small street gangs. They traffic cocaine, controlling its flow from Colombia and Peru through Ecuador's Pacific ports to the United States and Europe. They fight for territory. Like the coastal zones, drug routes, ports, and even prisons themselves. Inside prisons, they recruit new members and coordinate violence. Gang leaders might be locked up, yet they continue to run operations from behind bars. They extort businesses and civilians, carry out kidnappings for ransom and impose protection payments. They also infiltrate the state by weakening police, courts and prisons through bribery and corruption. Inside places like the Machala prison, gang affiliates aren't just inmates, they are power brokers. The mass hangings likely show how one faction decided to eliminate its rivals.
Removing high-level members would not necessarily translate into relief, but rather into a growing fragmentation of these groups and therefore a growing fight between a growing number of armed groups.
So how did Ecuador, once considered relatively safe, turn into Latin America's most dangerous country? There are several reasons. First, geography. Ecuador sits right between the world's top cocaine producers. Colombia and Peru has major export ports on the Pacific coast. That makes it a perfect transit hub for drug cartels. Then there is the economy. Ecuador uses the US dollar, which makes it an attractive place for money laundering by international cartels. Next, the violence. Over the past few years, gangs have begun using terror tactics like beheadings, car bombs, and public assassinations of politicians. This has pushed the country's murder rate to record highs. In Machala, the transfer of inmates to a new high-security prison was meant to reduce gang power. Reports say over 300 high-risk inmates were moved to the newly built Encuentro prison in Santa Elena province, part of President Daniel Noboa's plan to take back control. But ironically, the very announcement of that transfer triggered the violence. Once the inmates learned of the reorganization, tensions exploded. Hundreds of inmates have been killed in Ecuador's prisons over the past few years. And this latest incident shows just how vulnerable the system still is. It shows when organized crime takes root inside prisons, the danger does not stay behind bars. It spreads into the streets, into communities, into daily life. That's all in this edition of Connecting the Dots. We'll see you next week with more raging issues. Until then, it's a goodbye from all of us in the Delhi newsroom. This is Munmun Bhattacharya signing off. Take care and stay safe.